All right, so what we want to go through today is something that's a very common exercise that I see with golfers, something that's all over the place, that's talked about a lot, which is band exercises for rotation. So not only are we just going to go through the exercise with the bands, we're going to go through the correct sequence or the feel that you want with the exercise so it has the most carryover to your golf swing. So for today's drill, what we're doing is using 2 of these circle bands. I'm using 2 because I'm making it a little bit longer just for demonstration purposes. Right, so what I'm doing is I'm looping one around the other, putting this one through. So I'm creating one long band. And what I've done is anchored it on the floor here to this weight. So I'm going with the low setup. You could set this up at waist height. You could set it up higher. You could probably, the best thing to do is do a combination of all of these. But for demonstration purposes, for time purposes, I have the low setup. I'm using this green band here. All right, so what we're going to do. We're going to wrap it around your shoulder, number 1. All right, and then number 2, all I'm going to do is keep the shoulder high, keep my hands high. I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to wrap this band around my body. So shoulder to hip, across my waist, right? So now I've created this kind of rotational force with the band for my torso. So for my hip, my torso, my upper body, my shoulder, I've created this rotational kind of pull on the band. So as I just stand here relaxed, I'm being pulled into internal rotation of my hip. My shoulders are turning. It's created an artificial rotation for me. So first, this is the feel that we want to get with all the band rotational exercises you do. So if you're doing band exercise on your own, if you're doing cable exercises, any rotational exercise for golf, we want to make sure that the sequence is right. So the sequence that you want to think about is when we're doing any of our exercise, let's say we have the cable here, right? As we rotate, we want to think initiate with the hip and then finish with the hands. So hip, torso, shoulder, hands are last. Very similar to what you do in a golf swing. So one more time. I'm pulled back. Let me grab the club. Right, so before we even swing the club, let's just think of it. Right, we're going to put it here. So same idea. Let it pull us back into rotation. Back, back. So from here, I'm driving my butt back. I'm turning my torso, I'm turning my shoulder, and I'm finishing with a full rotation. Right? So it's a rotational movement initiated from my lower body. Right? So I'm not throwing my upper body through and just leaving the hips still. So what we're doing is very similar to what we do in a golf swing. We're turning the hips, internal rotate, driving the hips, turn the torso, finish with the hands. So for here, the feel is hips, 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 hips. Right? So this is for demonstration purposes, but this could be used as a nice little drill to really warm up those rotational muscles and work on. So if you're standing here with your club, nice and soft, back, through. Right? We're not doing a full swing here, but what we're doing is really trying to get those hips to turn, fire through, so that we're getting that same sequence that we want in our golf swing. And we're getting some endurance, we're working some reps through, right? We're getting good repetitions of an exercise or a movement that's very similar to what you do in your golf swing. So let's carry this over now into how we would do the same thing with some bands or some different types of bands. So the second exercise or the second drill, which is using the more common bands that I see people have, which are these bands with the handles on them, we're going to do the same thing. But I want to go through the most important part, which is following that same sequence when we go through this exercise. What I find a lot of people do is they have the band set up here, and they get here, and they just start kind of throwing their upper body. So from the waist up, they start to really turn that torso through. It's not the worst thing in the world, but we want to make sure if we're doing something for the purpose of improving our intermuscular coordination, improving the way our body moves and turns, especially for golf, we want to make sure we're firing in that right sequence. So what I would recommend is grab with the inside hand, outside hand is over. Same idea. Get pulled into a little bit of that backswing or that internal rotation with our hip, and then make sure we're firing the sequence from the hip first. So hip first, shoulder, torso second, finish with the hands. So we're firing the lower body and through. You don't have to go full speed. It doesn't have to be super fast, but we want to make sure the sequence, we're using the ground and the floor. So you should feel your feet really pushing through on the movement So we're using our lower body and it doesn't become an upper body dominant movement. Same idea carries over for a lot of people, myself included, with the golf swing. When you get too much upper body movement going, you lose all that power and all that strength in your golf swing. So we really want to make sure when we do these exercises, we're using the correct sequence of muscles and we're firing from our lower body and not letting the upper body of the arms take all the movement.